Okay, assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Hope you're all well. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Good to see you. Alaikum assalam, brother. Hey, assalam, Nico. I still need to reply to you. Hope you're well. So, salams. Hey, Lion Man. How you doing? Hope you're well. Today's episode. Okay, so today's episode, I'm going to be. It's related to last week. I mentioned last week that last time, that this next stream I will be doing a meta reading of Surat al-Nur. Trying to do that anyway, which is quite difficult about how I'm actually going to go about it. Trying to present something like this, it's very difficult to try to figure out a way to sort of put out across what I want to actually say. But I'm going to be given the shot, and we'll see how it goes. So this is the first time doing something like this. We'll see how it goes. There's a lot to get through. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. Maybe definitely more than 30 minutes, probably. I was going to split up into two because I was stuck on something until this morning. But now I can actually go ahead through the whole thing. So, okay, let's just get into it and we'll see how this goes, if I can get some of these points across or not. So let's first put in the share the whole screen. Put that over here. I'm going to have to check in on this every once in a while to make sure everything's okay. And let's get obsidian and this mushaf. Okay. So it'll probably be helpful for you if you have a mushaf open to help go through this. If not, you can just see what I'm showing on the screen here. I'm going to be trying to show the visualization. I didn't think about finding a mushaf which is going to be in English, so that I can show it. And this is Surat al-Nur. So if you have a mushaf handy or a Qur'an translation handy, you can keep it open on Surat al-Nur, Surah 24, as we go through this. That could be helpful. If you're watching this at a later date, you could pause it and try to follow along what I'm trying to show. So I try to provide a kind of understand why the different streams or different sets of verses are in the surah specifically together and in the order that they are, right? To try to give a sort of like a overarching feel or idea, or get the overarching message of the surah as sort of like a unit, right? Rather than in an atomized way, as I mentioned last time. Usually we read the Qur'an often in a very atomized way. We'd investigate a word and would find different passages from different surahs, bring it all together, bring all of the verses on a subject together. And, we look at that and we say that's a holistic way of reading. And it is, in a way, a holistic way of reading, because you're combining all of the data from multiple surahs, right, to get an overall idea of what the Qur'an is teaching on a certain topic, okay, or about, a certain concept in the Qur'an, like kufr or shirk, or salvation. You can get the idea from the whole Qur'an in that kind of way, but that's still an atomized kind of way. So you're sort of just combining the elements from different parts of the Qur'an, right? like combining the elements, the atoms of the same element from different parts of the Quran, putting them together, then studying that element, right? Rather than we have actual complete surahs in the Quran, right? We have actual complete surahs, and going on an assumption that the surahs are the way they should be, right? Then nothing is, you know, shifted around. Every surah is the way it's supposed to be. The verses are in the order that they're supposed to be. Then we don't often look at a whole surah altogether in one holistic way, unless it's one of the smaller surahs. I mean, I did that with what I called Surat Deen, right? أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. I did that in a couple of videos about woe to those who pray, wailun musallin. That one, that short surah, and it's easier to do. It's easy to do with short surahs, right? So you can look at a short surah and you can get the whole overarching theme with that. But what about some of these longer surahs, right? Some of these longer surahs, there seems to be these very big shifts, right? In narrative, suddenly you get a story popping up in the middle of it, and then you get verses about nature, signs of nature. Then you get some rules, and then you can get a lot of different things in one surah, and it's not immediately apparent how it all fits together, right? Maybe you can be able to see why some of it fits, some of it doesn't. I mean, we had somebody, I think it was last stream as well. What's his name again? I forgot his username, but he presented about kufr, and he mentioned that Surah al-Nur is about purity, right? Sexual purity. Okay, and if you look at it, and of course that's pretty apparent to see pretty quickly. You'll be able to see that. But then there's other parts of this surah where you say, okay, then how is that fitting into this idea, right? So what I'm trying to do is provide a kind of a meta reading of the whole surah, where I think you can sort of see how it all fits together. And I've done it in this, in Obsidian, you have this sort of like plugin canvas where you're able to make these mind maps. So I'm going to be showing it through there. It isn't complete, like I said. The last part over here, something which I only put in this morning because up to that point I was very stuck on something. I mentioned that in a community post as well. That's why I didn't do a live stream last week, right? Anyway, so let's get into it. So I'm going to start all the way from the top over here, of course. All right, so if you look at the very first verse, let's just start with right at the beginning, verse 1, okay? It seems this surah was all revealed in one go. That could be argued that this surah was revealed in one go. There are other surahs in the Quran, many other surahs, where it seems pretty apparent that not all the verses were revealed in one go in the same setting. They had different parts of the surahs were revealed at different times. In this case, the very first verse is Suratun, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Suratun anzalnaha, a surah which we have sent down. So it seems like the whole surah was sent down in one go. Okay? وَفَرَطْنَاهَا وَأَنزَلْنَا فِيهَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. So the beginning part, it's something which comes up later. It gets linked to quite a few other verses, right? Where you have this kind of punctuating thing throughout, where these kind of punctuating lines, I've got them here. And you see in one verse over here in verse 30, in verse 46. You see it in verse 34, right? You see it in verses sort of like around 11 to 20. It's repeated that thus, or this is how we have made the signs clear. كذلك نبين الآيات, right? And for different reasons throughout the surah it's mentioned. In the beginning it's saying, وَأَنزَلْنَا فِيهَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ, and we have sent down in it clear verses, clear signs, so that you may have dhikr, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so you may be reminded. So we're talking here about dhikr. Now remember in the Quran, dhikr is supposed to lead to taqwa, right? The dhikr, one of the the goals of dhikr is taqwa. And we see that later in the surah as well. But that's the first verse, okay? And then next part, we have this whole section, of course, which is all about the rules of zina. This first page, the very first page, it's all about the rules of zina, right? So the how to go about proving zina, the innocence or lack of the wife. And you note that I've mentioned this before, that zina is all about it's only when a married woman is involved, and that's why this beginning of the surah, when it's all talking about um, proving zina or disproving zina, it's all about um, um, it's centered around a wife, a married woman. Okay, it's not centered around um, the man, right? So zina is when a married woman is involved, whether or not the man she was with was married or not. Okay, so you have that, and then right after that, of course, you have the section about the lie, the ifk, the lie, the slander that was done, where in the traditional accounts, it's saying that a slander was made against the Prophet's wife. And this lie, which went about the community in the Prophet's time, we aren't told exactly what it is, but obviously it's a slander about zina. It's definitely a slander about zina just by where it is in the surah, right? By the topic, right? So it's definitely about that. But was it Aisha or not Aisha? Was it Maria al-Qibtiyya, or was it nobody related to the Prophet? None of the Prophet's wives. We don't know. The Quran doesn't tell us. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to note here was exactly that. So that's one of the reasons why I chose the surah as a candidate for this kind of meta reading, right? If there's any surah which has a chance it was all revealed in one go, a large surah, then it's Surah al-Nur, right? So it makes it maybe a little bit easier, right? A little bit easier to see the connections, right? So if it was all revealed in one go, we can't say, as in other surahs, that this section was revealed and then another section was revealed, and there's not really a connection between them. It's just that they were revealed at different times and put together in the same surah. No, if all of these sections were revealed together in the same surah, then they are all related in some way, right? They are all related in some way. So then we have surah from verse 2 to 10. It's regarding zina. So it's the punishment for zina. And we have a mention of the word deen, right? We have a mention of the word deen in that verse. So لا تأخذكم رأفة في دين الله. Let not compassion take hold of you with respect to the deen of Allah. And what does deen here mean? It means, as it means in many places in the Quran, judgment, right? Just like we say Yawmuddin, the day of judgment, right? We say the day of judgment in English because deen also means the judgments, right? So here we have in this surah, and you'll see that throughout, deen, right, means judgment, and that's again how it comes up in other sets of verses over here from verses 21 to 26. We have the use of word deen as judgment as well, so that links back to this previous set. Okay, so the punishment of zina, that's part of deen, as in part of judgment. Okay, it also talks about marriage with the guilty, with those guilty of zina, forbidden upon the mu'mineen. Right. So this is the verse where we have the faithful, for upon them is forbidden that they would marry a zani or zaniya, right? But not so a mushrik, right? So a zani may marry a mushrik, right? And that goes against, it doesn't go against, but I've explained that before, that what the forbiddenness here is the forbiddenness of faith, that a person of faith will not knowingly marry a person convicted of zina, right? Because there's no security there, right? Somebody who has committed zina, violated the marriage union, with somebody else, you have no security, no iman that might not happen to you, right? So note also, it doesn't say حُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ. It doesn't say حُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْكُمْ, like this is prohibited upon you, or this is prohibited on the Muslims. It says حُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. It's just the faithful, right? So it's quite specific, right? So that's why again I don't take this as being legally overriding the idea that in Surat Nisa we have the full list of who it's prohibited to marry and who it is not, right? So the punishment for slander is also in here. So slanderous testimony is also never accepted. And then husbands, of course, when accusing their wives, they must make those oaths. That's in this section too. And then it ends with a phrase, an incomplete phrase. It says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ, right? وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. The very ending of here, it says, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ تَوَّابٌ حَكِيمٌ. And if it were not for the blessings of God upon you and His mercy, and that God is sort of like repentant, wise. This is an incomplete sort of sentence. This first sentence is incomplete. And if it were not for the grace and the mercy of God upon you, what? Well, this incomplete sentence is completed later, and it's actually repeated. This incomplete sentence is repeated a few times until finally it is given its completion later on in the surah. Okay, then we get the next section. The next section is about the slander, right? So one thing that's mentioned in this section is it was good for you, right? That the slander was actually good for the community, right? Now, how was it a good thing for the community? How was it a good thing for the community? Well, it helped distinguish the khabith from the tayyib, right? The pure people from the impure people, right? Those who wish to see filth spread among the faithful and those who do not, right? So those who wish to see filth spread among the faithful, they spread that lie, they spread that calumny, they spread that slander, right? And that helps to purify the group of the believers themselves, right? That helps to purify them by knowing who are the slanderers, right? Helps to purify them, and also, of course, it gives those who slander and enjoy that kind of thing. It lets them repent. They are punished for the slander. And, in this section, it said that 80 lashes for somebody who brings such a slander against a married woman without witnesses. They get punished for that, and so it's sort of an opportunity for purity for them as well. Okay, so it helps us to separate the faithful from khabith and tayyib. It also in this section says that the mu'minin should have thought well of themselves. لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون بأنفسهم خيرا. The verse says, why wasn't it that when you heard this slander, why didn't the faithful, the mu'mineen, think well of themselves? ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا. Why do you think well of yourselves, right? That you are not people who would commit zina, right? So again, that also throws back again to the idea that zina is forbidding upon the faithful, the people of real iman, right? That links back to that previous verse. So they're supposed to look well upon themselves. Another interesting thing in this section is it says, you took it up with your tongues and said it with your mouths, which is an odd distinction, right? You took it up with your tongues and said it with your mouths, right? I just noticed that because I thought, okay, what about the rest of the Qur'an? How is this distinction brought up, right? That you pick things up with your tongues and you speak it with your mouths. Why not speak it with your tongues and pick it up with your mouths, right? There's just that distinction there. And then here again we have now that God makes clear, right? So we have يَعِذُكُمُ اللَّهُ أَن تَعُودُوا. God admonishes you that you should do this again. وَيُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ. So this links, and God makes clear for you the verses or the signs. This links back to the beginning of the surah, where it's saying أَنزَلْنَا فِيهَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ فِيهَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. We send down upon it, in it, clear ayat, so that you may be reminded. And here it's saying, وَيُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, and God is making clear for you the signs, right? So that's linking back to before, right? So God makes clear the ayat, right? So again, that's what I've got here is I've called it like punctuating verses. Okay, and then we get to another section, which is regarding words. Okay, the next section from verse 21 to 26 regarding words. Okay, and here we have sort of like the punchline almost through this section beforehand. We have sort of a punchline verse about the footsteps of shaitan. So we've had before this section here, this page about zina, right, and the rules of zina. Then we had sort of an example of it happening within the community of the Prophet, right? And how there are some people who love, here we have this verse, some people who love that the fahisha, the indecency, should spread among the mu'mineen. Again, فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, for them is punishment. And then we have this verse sort of like punctuating where this is all coming from. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan. O you who have faith, do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. And whoever follows the footsteps of shaitan, what is he commanding? فَإِنَّهُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. Then he is commanding fahsha, indecency, and open detestable things, munkar, things that you can see and say, okay, no, that's not right. And then we have وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. We have this verse again, which comes up over here. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. And over here, وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. In each of these two incidents, these first two incidents, it's incompleted. It's not complete. But over here, when it comes to shaitan, right, when it's mentioned about shaitan and that he tries to get you to go down his path of fahsha munkar, it says وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ مَا زَكَى مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ أَبَدًا. Not one of you would ever become pure, right? Not one of you would ever become pure. So it seems to show that shaitan is in the background pushing people towards impurity, towards fahsha and munkar. And if it wasn't for God's mercy and rahmah in the background also, nobody would become pure. Nobody would become pure, right? So this is where it gets completed, where that thought, and it's happened 2 times previously, it gets completed in this verse, in the verse which is warning against shaitan. Okay. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. So it's over here, right? But this whole section, okay, so you have this punchline sort of about shaitan, and the completion of the phrase وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ مَا زَكَى مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ. None of you will become pure. You have that. And then after that, we have a section which is mainly about words, right? Mainly about words. So previously, this has all been about sort of the actions of fahisha, right? The zina, right? The sexual fahisha of zina, right? But now we're talking about this next section is actually all about words, right? It's all about the sort of the fahisha of words and the munkar of words, right? This whole section is about that. So we have a command to not vow, to not give, right? Because it's also a munkar. To vow that I will not give charity, I will not give to those who need, that's also a munkar, okay? It's also a munkar. So don't vow not to give people. And this is also, you could say, it's a historical Easter egg, right? Because right over it says, وَلَا يَأْتَلِ أُولُو الْفَضْلِ مِنْكُمْ وَالسَّعَةِ أَنْ يُؤْتُوا أُولِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْمُهَاجِرِينَ. The muhajirin are specifically mentioned. So it's saying, let not any of you who have means vow that they will not give, in charity to their relatives and the poor and the immigrants in the path of Allah. But let them forgive and let them forgive and overlook. Okay? Do you not wish that, or do you not love that God should overlook and forgive for you? And God is forgiving, merciful. This seems to give validation to the traditional story, right? Because what it is, it's that Aisha is the one who seems to have been accused of zina. And of course, who is Aisha? She is the daughter of Abu Bakr. And in traditional story, what happened? Abu Bakr said that I'm going to not provide anymore for one of the people who slandered against Aisha. One of those who slandered against Aisha was actually a relative of his, so that's why it says relatives. He was poor and he was one of the immigrants, right? So this verse seems to be specifically addressing people like in Abu Bakr's position, which is kind of an Easter egg, right? And this is one thing I've been wanting to mention in other situations, how the Quran is peppered with these kind of Easter eggs, just like when you watch a movie, right, and the director will put things in there which for those who know, they will get the reference and they will know that that's intentionally put there, so you will understand the reference or the Easter egg. There seems to be these kind of things in the Quran for those who know their history to be able to actually help them realize which history is true and which is false. Okay, so because here this verse, it doesn't mention the Ansar, it doesn't mention the helpers, it's just the Muhajirin. So this seems to have happened from the Muhajirin, from the immigrants, right? And of course, a lot of the time, some people place the blame, the majority of the hypocrisy upon the Ansar, right? Upon the Ansar, as if the Muhajirun, they don't have hypocrites amongst them, right? Well, this seems to be showing the opposite. This seems to be showing that if anybody was the person who spearheaded the slander, it was likely one of the Muhajirin. It was likely one of the immigrants, not one of the Ansar. But anyway, so that's that. And then the next verse of it says, truly those who accuse or slander the virtuous women, or rather the married women, and who unaware married women, faithful women, they are cursed in the dunya and the akhirah. So here we have curse, right? A curse, which links back to the very first section, where if a husband falsely accuses his wife by taking the 5 oaths, right? The 5th oath is that the curse is upon him if he is lying, right? So that links in nicely with the idea that to slander a woman, even your wife, falsely, it's a cursed thing, right? لُعِنُوا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. But why is this verse here and not back over here? Again, it's sort of like an Easter egg to tell us that what happened, what caused this person in the previous verse to make that vow that he will not spend, what caused that person to make this vow, Abu Bakr it seems, is that this person did this slander upon his relative, right? Made this slander. Okay, and here again we have يومئذ يوفيهم الله دينهم الحق. So again, the use of deen here again is about judgment. So on that day, God will give to them their judgment in truth. He will give them the real judgment, and they will know that God is the truth and the clear, mubin, which again ties into the very beginning of the verse and throughout the surah, where it's talking about how God will make things mubin, make things clear with his ayat. And then we have the verse al-khabithatu lil-khabithin. So evil words are for evil people. Filthy words are for filthy people, basically, right? Wal-khabithuna lil-khabithat, right? And filthy people are for filthy words. Wat-tayyibatu lil-tayyibin. And good words are for good people. And good people are for good words. Ulaik mubarra'una mimma yaqun. These are people who have innocence with respect to what they say. For them is forgiveness and great rizq. So that section here is all about purity with regards to words, right? So it's about purity with regards to words, right? And also about how limbs will testify. So it doesn't have to be exactly just words. You can actually try to do it with signs, right? You can actually start to like in the Surah Al-Humazah, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ, right? You slander using sign language and indications and stuff like that, right? Okay, so you have that, and here again, bad, good words and bad, good people, go together. So slander is, of course, included in bad words. Okay, as is false hopes to get out of punishment for zina. That's also bad words. As well as giving your vows not, making vows not to give, right? So these are all types of munkar, right? So the previous, the tie-in is again, you had do not follow the way of shaitan, right? He commands fahsha and munkar, right? And what we have is the previous verses are about the fahsha, zina, and the verses right after it about the munkar of speech, munkar min al qawl, right? To say, despicable things, right? To say despicable things like slander. Slander is a munkar. Vows, false vows, is a munkar. Filthy words. These are all munkar things, right? So it's a very nice tie-in where you have this verse about shaitan, right? And how God is one who will, through His mercy, will purify you from both of these sides. So you've got the side that's before this verse about zina and fahisha, and the side after it about bad words and munkar. Right, so that's this whole section over here. And then we have the next section over here. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tadkhulu buyutan ghayra buyutikum. Do not enter homes except your own homes. Right. So we come down over here. The etiquette of visiting. Okay. So don't enter. See if I can make it something bigger. So don't enter homes where you aren't given permission. Okay, and permission comes up later in the verse of light itself, right? في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع, in homes God has permitted to be raised, right? And here it's saying do not enter homes where you aren't given permission, because why is that? That brother mentioned it last week as well, or last time, because it can lead to zina, right? So you all go into homes where you're not invited without permission, right? You see something you like, or maybe you don't like, right? It can lead to zina, or speaking bad words about others, or seeing what you shouldn't. Okay, all of these things. So these are, and that's why the next verse after that you have the verses of lowering your gaze. These are related together. You don't go where you shouldn't be invited, and you should also be lowering your gaze. These are all ways in which to ensure the purity, right? These are ways through which God is going to actually give tazkiyah, right? So that's what we have from these verses. From this verse over here, verse 27, up to verse 29. That's all about not entering homes where you shouldn't, where you're not invited. And then right afterwards, we have the verse about lowering your gaze. You, O Prophet Muhammad, tell the faithful to lower of their gaze and guard their private parts. That is purer for them. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. Right? So that's Allah helping us to gain zakat, right? Tazkiyah. So this is part of what is mentioned over here, that if it wasn't for the mercy of God upon you, then none of you would become pure. Well, one of the ways in which God has given us mercy to help us to become pure is through this command, right? That we should lower our gazes, right? And the same thing for the women. With them, there's an added thing of not revealing themselves. And now, why is that mentioned with respect to women? So men and women are to lower their gazes, right? That's more pure for them. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ. That part is mentioned for men only, right? So if you go to the verse, say to the faithful to lower their gazes, guard their chastity, that's purer for them, right? And then afterwards, say to the believing women, right, to lower their gazes and guard their chastity. But it's not afterwards said that is purer for them. Now it's implied, of course, but there is something else here which is added as well. وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنْ, and let them not reveal their adornments. All right, and that goes up all the way to the end. So the implication here is that this is part of women themselves being pure for their own selves as well. It isn't just about that that men and women like to look at what they shouldn't, and by refraining from looking, that's pure for them. For women, there seems to be an implication here that it's added part that it's pure for women not to reveal themselves, in that women enjoy that. Just as men might enjoy looking at what the haram, women enjoy revealing the haram, right? There's a kind of like, it's part of like of femininity to enjoy people looking at them, till they like that men should look at them, right? And so by covering, by not revealing, that is a way to push purity on yourself. Just like a man must lower his gaze, a woman should be not actively trying to reveal her adornments, right? Because that is that that go like men. It's not the same for men, right? So women have to lower their gaze and to not reveal their adornments, and that is more purer for women. That's another aspect for women in terms of their purity. That women don't, they're not like they're not as tempted by lustful gaze as men are, right? So women have that part for women is lower, and instead they have another aspect, which is they are tempted by revealing themselves, right? Women desire or covet being looked at more, more, and they desire looking less, right? If that makes sense, right? The men just desire just to look. That's how they are. They like to look, whereas women, they don't like to look as much, and then they like to be looked at more, right? So that goes together. Then it talks about, of course, the next section, verse 32 to 33, the marriage to slaves, right? So it's enabling the slaves in society to marry. Okay, and of course that reduces the chances of zina. It helps them to lower their gaze. It reduces opportunities for slander, etc. So that all ties in with that. And then we have this punctuating verse, right? After all of that, we've mentioned the rules for zina. It's mentioned the actual slander that happened in the Prophet's lifetime. Do not follow the path of shaitan, for he commands to fahsha and munkar. Then talks about the munkar of speech, slandering and bad words and that sort of thing. Then talks about do not enter homes where you are not invited. Okay, obviously, so you don't see what you shouldn't. The next verses are about how don't about lowering your gaze, right? Lowering your gaze, and for women as well, not to deliberately reveal themselves. And now we have the marriage about slaves, and then after all of that, verse 34 comes, which seems to basically say that this is the completion of what was mentioned in the beginning of the surah. وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ. Right? The start of the surah said what? سورة أنزلناه فرضناها وأنزلنا فيها آيات بينات. We sent down upon it clear verses so that you may لعلكم تذكرون, so that you may be reminded or admonished. Well, now it seems that this verse over here, the one right before the verse of light, is saying that's done. We've done that. وَلَقَدْ, right? And we have now أنزلنا إليكم, sent down upon you آيات مبينات. So before it's ayat bayinat, right? Ayat bayinat, and here we have ayatin mubayyinat. And these have been clarifying verses. وَمَثَلًا, and also a mathal مِنَ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِن قَبْلِكُم, and also an example from those before you. Now, what was that example? The example was that of the lie, the slander that happened, right? To this day, it's been recited in the Qur'an. Those who went before us, what happened then, right? Then, the slander happened. They took it with their mouths. They didn't. The faithful did not think of themselves in a good way, right? With respect to zina, etc. وَمَثَلًا مِنَ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَمَوْعِظَةً, and also some maw'idha, some advice, some admonition. What was the admonition? What was the maw'idha? The maw'idha was that, lower your gazes, do not enter homes where without being invited, right? Marry off the people in your society, the slaves and the downtrodden especially, right? Those who are not able to should, commit themselves to chastity, right? Etc. That's all in that verse. Okay. وَمَوْعِظَةً for who? For the muttaqeen, for those who have taqwa. And that ties in again the very first verse, because it says لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so that you may receive dhikr. And over here it mentions taqwa, and of course dhikr leads to taqwa, right? So this section from the beginning, we have all of this ayat mubayyinatin, so you may gain dhikr, and by the end of it, as you come to this verse, you should have taqwa. Right? So you're starting with dhikr at the beginning of the surah, and it's ending here with a mention of taqwa. Right? And these are the ayat mubayyinat in between, making clear about that. Right? Or including, of course, the warning against shaitan. That's also maw'idha. I didn't mention that. Okay, so that whole segment, the whole beginning section starts to make a lot of sense when you start just tie it all together, right? And now we have something else. Now we have the central. Obviously, anybody reading this surah, Muslims and non-Muslims, everybody automatically sees how this verse jumps out as being the central jewel in the surah. Right, the central thing in the surah, this great similitude of God's light, this huge similitude of God, it comes up right over here, right? After closing off what we just mentioned, we have this, all of this was mentioned, right? After closing all of that off, now we have the central thing about God's light, right? About the example of God's light. Why is that here specifically? Okay, and what does it mean? Right. I'm going to dive in a little bit more into the actual method itself. But why is it? Why is it there? Right. That's a key thing to look at. So I'm going to check that everybody's with me. Discussions about they're good to be hafiz. How do you understand not to reveal the adornments based on the Quran? I think there are some things, for example, like that, where it might not be as easy for men to understand. It might be easier for women to understand. We don't have this, women even from a very young age, right? From when they're girls, when they start to understand that, when they start to feel the men's gaze upon them and start to enjoy the feel of men's gaze upon them, right? They start to, develop ways and techniques of trying to attract that gaze and reveal themselves in certain ways, and they're conscious about this a lot more than we would be, right? So that these are things where I think it's easier for women to explain it to other women than for men to understand in any way, right? Okay, so let's carry on. So the verse of light. So its place here seems to say that the attainment of God's spiritual light in the heart is intimately connected to taqwa, first of all, which was the final verse, the final word in the previous verse, right? وَمَوْعِظَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ اللَّهُ نُورُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. God is the light of the heavens on the earth. So you need taqwa. You need taqwa before you can be sort of exposed to God's light. Okay, and it seems to be specifically one of the damaging things or barriers to this spiritual light is going to be these kind of things, which has been mentioned in the previous section of the surah. This whole thing about, and this is something which is known world order, right? When people talk about purity, the first thing that comes to mind is sexual purity, right? And purity, of course, is what's going to let light go through, right? You need a pure glass that will allow light to go through. A pure window, a clean window, lets light going through. A dirty window is a barrier to light coming through. Okay. So it's intimately connected with taqwa, and especially taqwa with respect to refraining from zina in particular, right? So it seems to be zina will be something which is a very big barrier against God's light. Refraining from lies and slander, speaking good words and lowering one's gaze, for both sexes, not flaunting one's adornments for women, etc. Everything that's mentioned before, right? That seems to be something which the admonition given before all of that seems to be something which needs to be in place. Taqwa with respect to all of that needs to be in place to allow this light to come through. Okay. I guess, as again I said over here, the light of a lamp cannot be seen if the glass in which it resides is dirty and not pure, right? Rather, the glass should sparkle, right? It should sparkle like a star, which is what's mentioned in the verse, right? So let's go over the verse a little bit so we can appreciate what it said here. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. God is the light, the heavens and the earth, and pay attention to heavens and earth because that comes up later. All right. مثل نوره, the example of his light is like a mishkat fiha misbah. Mishkat is a wall niche. If you look in the image of the thumbnail, and I'll show the image again here. It's a niche, sort of like an indent in the wall, in which people used to put their lamps, right? A niche in which is a lamp, right? A lamp. The lamp is in the glass. The glass, as if it were a brilliant star, a brilliant star. يوقد من شجرة, which is lit from a tree, a blessed tree, zaytuna. A blessed tree. Now, this, of course, zaytuna could mean just olive, but I have a different take on that. Zaytunatin, la sharqiyatin wa la gharbiya, neither from the east nor from the west. Yakadu zaytuha yudhi. It's as if its oil is almost given off its own light. وَلَوْ لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُ نَارٌ, even though no light, even though no fire has even touched it. Right, so you just need to, of course, the oil just needs a touch of fire to light it. But even without a touch of fire to light it, this oil seems to sparkle, right? وَلَوْ لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُ نَارٌ نُورٌ عَلَى نُورٍ, light upon light. God guides to his light whoever he wills, and God sets forth examples for mankind, and God is most knowledgeable of all things. So, what I've read here, so the light of a lamp cannot be seen if the glass in which it resides is dirty and not pure. Rather, the glass should sparkle like a star. The glass in the vessel for the light, what is it? It's the human heart, right? So when we're talking about here, what is the glass in this method, in this example? The glass is the human heart. The glass is the human heart, right? And that's where that light can be placed. Allah nuru samawati wal ard. God is the light of the heavens and earth. The example of his light, okay, the example of his light, what? Where will that be? Right? We're not really talking about the sun or the moon or the stars, right? We're talking about something else, talking about spiritual light. That is going to be in the heart, right? Which is why when we talk about the thing which is sparkling here, kawkabun durriyun, that's the human heart, the glass vessel in which has to be clear to allow that light to shine forth. Okay? And now it can be lit. Where can it be lit? Where can we get the oil for this heart? Where can we put oil for this lamp? It can be lit from any blessed tree, right? Any blessed tree. Min shajaratin mubarakah. Doesn't say al-shajara al-mubarakah, the blessed tree. Shajara mubarakah, right? It's in the indefinite. Shajaratin mubarakatin zaytuna. Zaytuna here I would take to mean anything which possesses oil. which possesses oil, right? Zaytuna, even the word zaytuna, I mean, I know we say, why is olive oil called olive oil, right? It's because you get from it zayt, right? It was called, yeah, the olive tree was called zaytuna because from it comes zayt, right? The name for the olive oil actually comes from the word of oil itself, right? Zayt, right? So it can be lit from any blessed tree. What can that be? It's any blessed spiritual tradition, any blessed religious spiritual tradition, whether from the east or from the west. لا شرقية ولا غربية. Doesn't have to be from the east, doesn't have to be from the west, right? You can find a spiritual tradition in the east or in the west, all across the globe, which will provide this oil, right? Which will provide this oil when pressed, which will be in your heart, from which can come, light, right? God's light can shine forth from that. Okay. So, from any blessed religious tradition, from the east or from west, because the concepts, the principles of lighting the heart with God's light are neither east nor west, right? It's about the human heart, right? The tree must only be a zaytun, it must be something which contains oil. So, it can't be a false tradition, can't be a false religious tradition, right? False religious tradition, a false tree, something which has no oil, something which is not a zaytun, it doesn't contain any oil inside. You can't press any oil from it, get any pure oil from it for your heart. Okay, so the pure oil of any spiritual tradition, any tree that comes out when pressed, it's brilliant and pure and almost shining itself, even without being touched by fire from God, right? So without even being touched by any kind of fire, any kind of like spiritual spark from the unseen realm, right? That heart by itself with that oil, already it's almost shining forth. Okay, but when you have that oil in your heart, and God's mercy can come down and light it, then you're going to have light upon light. Okay, that is truly light upon light, and God guides to His light whoever He wills. Right. So in this in the similitude, what is the niche then? What is the niche of the wall? So altogether, so far I've spoken about the lamp, right, and the heart, and the tree, and the oil. What is the niche on the wall? Okay, well, it must be the outward religious traditions, right? The minhaj, the sharia, the deen, right? The judgments, right? Like that's for Zina, right? That the lamp can only live, can only be protected by those things, right? It has to be, because that's the purpose of the niche. It's not just to throw out and position light, right? It's also protects the lamp, right? Protects the lamp if it's very windy, if there's drafts or anything like that. The niche sort of like helps to protect the lamp from going off. Okay, so the niche in this similitude represents the judgments, the religious judgments, the sharia, the traditions, the outward traditions. Okay, just as the zaytuna represents the spiritual traditions, and you see that as well in terms, especially in Islam, when it comes to the Sufic orders, you talk about the tree, right? The tree of Sufi masters, right? Who learned from who learned from who learned from who, right? And most spiritual traditions, they revolve around having teachers who will teach you, right? Because they have light, right? They have walked the path and they are enlightened, and so through them, your own oil, which you've gathered, can be lit, right? Can be lit, and we'll come to that again a little bit later. All right. So the rest of the wall, of course, is darkness. The rest of the wall is dark. If you look at this image, for example, this is an image of let me zoom in a little bit, of a lamp in a niche, right? And the rest of the wall ends up being in darkness, right? Because it's like saying again that the sharia, the outward part of the deen, should be enlightened, lit up itself, right, by the lamp, Okay, so that's that similitude. Okay, where is this light can be found? Where can this light be found? Which is what the next parts of the verse talks about. So it says, next part of the surah. So it gives us similitude of light, of God's light. Then it says, it tells us where you can find it. So, if this verse was said to you, you'd want to know, okay, then where is this light, right? If you were going to have this verse just by itself come out at you, what's the next logical question? What do you want to know? You want to know where you can see this light. Where can you find it, right? And that's basically what the next verse straight away answers. It says, "Fi biyutin adin Allah an turfa wa yuzkara fiha ismu." In homes, where is this light? You can find it in homes that God has allowed to be raised, and it just says homes, biyut, right? So it doesn't have to be mosques. Okay, it could be like the Quran mentions in other places, right? That biyutan yuzkara fiha ismullah kathiran, that the places that that have been raised up in which God's name is mentioned often, right? In mosques, in churches, in synagogues, various temples. يذكر فيها اسمه, in places where God has allowed has allowed them to be raised, in which God's name is mentioned much. يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال. So we're talking about a ritualistic tasbih, right? We're talking about something which happens morning and evening, the tasbih, right? The glorification of God, right? And here's وَيُذْكَرَ فِيهَا ismu, and his name is being mentioned. It's not just God has been remembered, right? His name, actual name, is being chanted, remembered, right? These are all very indicative of what's known in the world order, right? That, the use of mantras and meditation and regular devotional practices, right? Spiritual practices. In Islam, of course, it's always been the zikr of the Sufis and the zikr, the invoking God's name in the morning, evening, repeating phrases like La ilaha illallah and meditating on them, right? These are what's happening, right? ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال. And where specifically? Okay, is it in the actual homes, in the buildings? Where is this light? Of course, it's with the people, right? It's with the people. يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال رجالا لا تلهم, men whom neither trade, no selling will divert them from the remembrance of God. Now here it's mentioned the remembrance of God in the sort of like the wide way, right? So even while they are trading out in the world, they remember God. To remember God in everything you do, in all of your actions, not just talking here about the tasbih and the mantras and the repeating formulas of God's name and mentioning them much like that as well. Okay, it's talking about dhikr in the absolute sense, and the establishment of salah and the giving of zakah. يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. They fear a day in which the hearts will change, right? تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار, and the vision, their vision. So these are people who have light; they are able to see, right? Just mentioning their vision. Okay, so thus this light, okay, it's in homes of dhikr. This light can be found in any home of dhikr, even personal homes which are raised for dhikr, right? Including mosques, churches, synagogues, in which God's name is remembered, chanted, recited, invoked. Okay, where men exist who do tasbih morning and evening, right? It's found with among men of dhikr who are not distracted by the world from dhikr of Allah, from salah, from zakah, and who fear a day where their hearts, thus containing light, might change, right? Their hearts might change. And so these will be rewarded for the best of what they have done and more. So God will reward them by the best of what they have done and increase them from His bounty. So that's that section, right, of the verse of light, right, ends basically around here, right. So it talks about the God is the light of the heavens and the earth, and we said how that's linked to all the previous verses that you need to have taqwa in all that came before, essentially before you can hope to have some of this light, right? And where can it be found? You're you're not engaged in fahsha and munkar. You're engaged in tasbih and dhikr. It's going to be tasbih and dhikr, in especially in places where people gather for that. Okay, where you can most likely get some of this light right into your heart. And in the next part, what do we have? We have now the example of الذين كفروا, right? So it says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ, right? And as for those who have kafaru, the ingrates, their actions are like a mirage. So this is the next section that we have here. What do we have? We have two examples of the actions of الَّذِينَ كَفَروا, of the kuffar, right? Example one is that their actions are like a mirage, right? And example two is as darkness in the deep sea, okay? And it ends saying that whoever Allah doesn't give light, then for him there is no light, right? So this, of course, this section is intimately connected with the previous verses about God's light to those people of dhikr. Okay, now we're talking about those who are completely bereft of God's light, right? And it's all about their actions, right? The first example is about a false light, right? It's a mirage, right? A mirage is nothing but a false light. If you've ever been in a hot country or deserts where you can start, even when you're driving, sort of. I know, I've done these long drives across Saudi Arabia, and when you look into the distance on the road, you can actually see water, right? Like on the actual on the road, you think, oh my God, that looks like water. It actually looks like water, right, in the distance. But it's just light, and it's false light, right? So who are these who have false light? So these are kuffar, I think. These are the ones who think they are doing good. They think they have light, right? They think they are doing good deeds, light, but they are not. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. So that's why, again, I encourage you all to remember to read these verses, because I'm sort of alluding to things in the verse, so I don't have to actually read the whole thing. I mean, the verse here says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ. Those who have kafaru, their actions are like a mirage, right, in the desert, okay? The thirsty person thinks it's water until they come to it and they don't find anything there, but they find God and He gives the accounting, and God is quick to account, right? So they think they are doing good deeds, but they are not. There's actually nothing there. لم يجده شيئا حتى إذا جاءه لم يجده شيئا. When he comes to it, he sees there's nothing there. There's nothing there, right? These are kuffar who have actions, and they think that these actions are good, but there's actually nothing there, right? They are deluded. These are the kuffar who are deluded, thinking they are doing good, right? They are not doing good. Like who? I mean, the obvious examples again are these extremists who will kill, who will kill apostates, attack this, do all of these things, thinking that they're actually doing good works, right? They will commit all the atrocities and think they are doing good deeds, and they think they will come on day of judgment and God will give them rewards. No, right? So that's one example. Okay, they will come on judgment day thinking they have something, but they will find only Allah, who will swiftly take them to account for the evil they have done. Okay, this is again a reminder that the kuffar don't come on day of judgment with good deeds, and then God says, "No, I do not accept your good deeds because you do not believe." No, it's their actions, right? This is a similitude of the الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, their actions. So that's one form of the kufr. There's also those who follow others thinking that they are doing good deeds. So there are sometimes there are figures, especially again the shuyukh and these people. From a distance, looks like they're doing good deeds. From a distance, it looks like they are people of virtue, of honor, of taqwa. Okay, those who from a distance seem like they are doing good, but it's just a mirage. Okay, or they talk as if they are doing good, but when you get close to them, right? When you get close, you find that their outward projection to the world is just a false light. It's a mirage, and they're actually engaged in a lot of fahisha and munkar. They're engaged in a lot of fahisha and munkar. And you find this, there's many of this type among the religious scholars and the shuyukh and the priests and the rabbis, right? Or the Catholic priests who end up sexually abusing, children, or if it is rabbis, right, who are who have been doing whatever, or the shuyukh. You find this a lot, right? Somebody who has the outer persona of a sheikh, right, of a scholar, of a person of religion, of God, right? When you investigate, when you look in, you find that it's just a mirage and there's nothing there, and that they are filled with evil deeds, right? Filled with evil deeds. So that's one. That's the first example, right? The first example is about الذين كفروا, who their actions are like a mirage, right? There's nothing there. It's not. There's nothing actually there of worth. And the next one is those under layers of darkness. So you have those who are under layers of darkness and they know it. Okay? They know it. So that verse says, أو كظلمات, or, because these are, and that's why I put them sort of side by side, because these are two sort of like equal similitudes, or both about الذين كفروا. They're either going to be like this, mirage, or they're going to be like this, okay, darkness, and they know it, like under deep darkness. So in this verse it says أو كظلمات في بحر لجين, or like darknesses in a deep ocean, يغشاه موج, on top of him, right, on top of him, يغشاه, who is a who, this is the person of the kafir, basically mentioned in this similitude, that he's at the bottom, right? أو كظلمات في بحر لجين يغشاه موج من فوقه موج, covered on top of him is waves, on top of him is more waves, on top of that is clouds, okay? ظلمات, right? Darknesses, بعضها فوق بعض, some on top of the other. إذا أخرج يده لم يكد يراها. If he puts out his hand, he can barely see it. ومن لم يجعل له نور فما له من نور, right? So these are kuffar who have buried themselves deep under turbulent waves and clouds of darknesses, right? They've committed evil after evil after evil, knowingly, right? They know they're in complete darkness, right? They are in so deep they can't even recognize themselves anymore, right? If they put out their hands, they can't see it, right? They can't see it. They can't even see their own hands nor their own humanity anymore, right? No light pierces that darkness, right? It's very deep. It's not a false mirage anymore. It's just people engaged in pure evil, right? And they're right down at the bottom. They would have to, and they would have to go through a huge amount to get out of that, right? They would have to go through the dark clouds, for light to come down to them at the bottom of the sea. How would it have to come through? It would have to come through the clouds, a layer of clouds. Then it would have to go through one layer of waves, of dark waves, then another layer of dark waves, right, before it can reach them. So no light reaches them. Right? No light reaches them at all, right? And they have no connection to any spiritual light, to God. So when we talk about al-Nur as-samawati wal-ard, that example of His light being like a lamp, right? And that lamp, we say it's like the heart of the believer, right? The light goes into it. Well, this person at the bottom of the sea, no light is going into his heart, right? It's completely disconnected from the heavens above, right? So again, when Allah says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, He is the light of the heavens and the earth. We're talking about the heavens and the earth. Yeah, you could say, of course, the earth includes the seas, right? But there's almost an illusion here. Why is the example being given of this kafir in the sea? It's not on the earth. It's not on the land, right? So there's no light down there. There's no light down there. So no light will come down to him, and nor will it be easy for him to get up from there. Okay, it will not be very easy for him to rise up, right? He is so submerged. For him to rise up, he'd have to push and swim up through waves of buffeting, waves which are buffeting and waves which are buffeting, and before finally getting up to the surface, and then hoping that the clouds will part and some light will come down to him, right? A very big ask, right? Which is why, the Quran often talks about some of the kuffar, summun bukmun umun fahum la yarji'un, deaf and dumb, blind, they will not come back, right? They're in too deep. There are some people that really go into evil so deep that they just will not come back. Okay, they will not come back. And then, of course, the end of this verse says, and he for whom God makes no light, then he has no light. So the question comes, how does God make light for someone? How does God make light for someone? Okay. And that's what I think the next verses are talking about. Let me see how we're doing for time, because maybe I should actually 1 hour and 10 minutes. Maybe I should actually split this up into sections, because there's a lot there, and maybe I should get some feedback about how this is, how people are getting this, and then maybe I can continue next time and make some amendments if it hasn't been as clear as it should be. Okay, so we're up to this section here where, like I said, that so it's mentioned that God is the light of the heavens and the earth, right? And then afterwards mentioned the darknesses of الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. And the very ending of that, it says, and whoever God does not make light for him, then he has no light. And the natural question that comes up is, how does God make light for someone? Right? من لم يجعل الله له نور من لم يجعل الله له نورا فما له من نور. Whoever God does not make for him a light, then he has no light. You'd want to know, okay, then how can God make light for me, right? Okay, if these people that live in the kafir are so far deep in darknesses, okay, that's them, but can they still get light? Can I still get light? How? Right? And that's how I think this next section, which talks about these are metaphors for, it talks about signs of nature, right? It says, do you not see that to Allah the tasbih of whoever's in the heavens and whoever's in the earth and the birds, etc. And then you have afterwards the similitude of how God creates thunderstorms, right, and lightning. And then you have the verse about, and that God created from what, for all living things, وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَ كُلَّ دَابَّةٍ مِّن مَاءٍ, created everything which crawls or moves from water, and some of them, crawled on their bellies, some of them go on 2 legs, some of them on 4, etc. And then afterwards it says at the end of that part about nature, signs of nature, is وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ. We have sent down clear verses. And again, so this, I think it ties in. What we have here is some similitudes from nature to show us how God makes light for somebody. Right? But I think maybe I should leave that, because I was thinking maybe too ambitiously that I'd be able to get through the whole surah. But maybe we should stop there, and I can go through the rest later. What do you think? Any feedback from, as our streamers call it, chat? What do you say? Should we continue or leave the rest for next time? Or have I put everybody to sleep? Oh no, there's 10 people with us, so that's all right. Yeah, I think we'll call it. If anybody wants to come on and discuss anything which I've mentioned so far, please do so. And I think we'll continue with this meta reading of Surat al-Nur next time. There really is a lot in the surah. I mean, it's amazing when you start to, because what I did basically since Ramadan, since I mentioned I wanted to do a meta reading of the surah, I've basically reading it, not every day. I've tried to read it every day, but maybe I'd say 60% of those days, 70% since. And you really do start to see things each time. Each time you see, more and more connections. And like I said, when you try to read it, try to hold the whole thing in your mind at once. So as you read, try to keep in your mind everything that's mentioned at once. The section which I found the most, the thread, I should say, of verses which I found the most problematic until this morning, surprisingly, is those verses which start to talk about the Prophet and obedience to him. Because if you remember in the stream where we talked about obeying the messenger, this surah actually has that section which is which is heavy in obedience, in the word of obedience. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول, obey God and obey the Messenger. It mentions obedience many, many times, right, in the surah, in that section. And within it is the only instance in the Quran where it says obey the Messenger without mentioning obey God. So in the surah we have obey the Messenger without obey God. And of course, we've mentioned before that in the whole Quran, you don't have a single verse which says obey God by itself, standalone. But you do have a verse which says, stand alone, obey the Messenger, and it exists in the surah. And so I found for a while, until this morning, I found that difficult to see how that relates to the rest of the surah. But surprisingly, this morning it clicked. Jazakallah, thank you, Nico. All right, so if anybody wants to come on backstage, please do so. Otherwise, I think maybe I will close the stream in presenting for about an hour, and maybe I should close it off, like I said, and we can continue next time. Maybe it will end up even being in 3 parts. Which verse did we get up to? So we got up to so we got up to verse 40, and the surah altogether is 64 verses, so that's not too bad. So I think we'll definitely be able to finish it off next time. Let me just check the chat if there's anybody had any questions. Yeah, I think because I would like to continue, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to finish it without just being tired out. It would take probably another hour to finish the surah. So let's just leave it for next time, and I can finish it there. Can a murderer be forgiven if his scale of good deeds gets higher than the weight of his sins? I don't think so. I mean, the Qur'an doesn't even give that as an option. It doesn't talk about except he who repents or anything like that. And how are you going to do that? I mean, how is your it seems to be just a direct judgment in the Quran, and we're talking here about the person who deliberately murders somebody enjoying safety, right? It's not just a murderer. I mean, in Western legal theory, in world legal theory, you have various degrees of murder. There's first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, right? Each one of these has different judgments, right? And that's for a reason, okay? What we're talking about here in that verse in the Quran is really first-degree murder in the worst possible way. Somebody who is premeditatedly, cold-bloodedly, plans out to do a murder of somebody who is enjoying safety, right? Somebody like that, when we say it's going to enter hell forever and that's it, and there's no other, it's because there's no need for him, and whatever comes next for humanity, there's no need for somebody like that. Somebody who can bring themselves to murder like that. There's no future for him with the rest of humanity. Okay, but of course, in the end, what's going to happen on Day of Judgment? Who knows? Maybe there's going to be some other way out, some other loophole that we can't see, right? But no, I don't think, as far as I can tell. Yeah, again, I'm putting my views alongside the Quran here. There's no other thing about it. Now, can a person's good deeds outweigh the sin of murder? See, I don't know how it would be. I mean, it doesn't seem to be that it's involved in the weighing here, because the judgment is just being given, right? وَمَن يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ. Whoever kills a person enjoying safety deliberately, then his reward is hell, right? And it is the most harsh verse in the Quran. People, point to other verses as being the most harsh, but no, this is really is the most harsh verse in the Quran because it mentions everything literally. For Jazahu Jahannam, his reward is hell. That's the first thing. Khalidan fiha, forever. وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ, the anger of God is upon him, and his curse, وَلَعْنَهُ, right? I mean, we just saw in Surah al-Nur how, well, I didn't read it, but in Surah al-Nur how the woman the wife who makes those oaths against herself, if she commits zina, the final oath is that the anger of God upon her, if he is truthful, if the husband is speaking truthfully, and she has committed zina, then the anger of God is being invoked upon her. And the husband, if he is lying, the curse of God is being invoked upon him. Well, here for the murder we have both, right? I don't think there's any other verse where you have both mentioned, the anger of God and the curse, both. Okay, غضب الله عليه ولعنه, and he cursed him. وعد له عذابا عظيما, and he has prepared for him a huge punishment, عظيم, right? Not just alim, right? Alim is painful punishment. That's mentioned in the Quran, right? But عذابا, عذابا عظيما, we're using one of the words which is used to be an attribute of God. That God is al-Azim. He is the immense or the great. And here the punishment is being described that way. Azab and azima. There's no harsher verse in the Quran than that. Okay, you have everything being mentioned in there. Worst type of punishment, God's curse, God's anger, okay, and hell. And there's no, the verse after it doesn't say except he who repents like in other verses, except for he who repents or except for he who, no, that's not an option. Jazakallah, yes. I mean, yeah, it's an amazing surah. I mean, please do yourselves go through the surah and read it a few times during the next couple of weeks, and see if you can add something to what I've said so far, and then you can mention it in the next live stream. Okay. All right. I think we'll call it quits there. Unless, okay, we've got something else here. It's absolutely amazing from how many angles you can approach the Quran and get guidance and learn by doing meta reading, holistic reading from the historical perspective and psychological. Yes, it is definitely so. All right, okay, I think we'll end the stream there. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for coming. I encourage you to, listen to the stream again and read the surah, pause it as you listen, pause it, and try to see the verses at least from the perspective which I've given here. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.